Story 1. The Man in the Back Seat. I still get chills every time I think about that night. It was late, past night, and I was driving home alone from a friend's house. The roads were quiet, the streetlights flickering weakly, casting long, unsettling shadows. My car was old, the kind that made strange noises when you least expected it, and the radio barely worked, crackling between stations. I remember stopping at a red light, tapping my fingers nervously on the wheel, when I noticed a truck behind me. Its headlights were blinding, far too bright for comfort. I squinted into my rear-view mirror and saw the truck inching closer. The driver was flashing his high beams. Once, twice. Then he started honking. My pulse quickened. Was he trying to mess with me? Was this some kind of sick game? I tried to ignore him and press the gas as soon as the light turned green, but the truck followed. More flashing lights. More honking. My hands gripped the wheel tightly. The road ahead stretched endlessly, dark and empty. I turned onto a side street, hoping to lose him, but he followed. I accelerated. He did too. My breath came in short gasps. Was I being chased? Finally, I saw a gas station up ahead. It was closed, but there were security cameras. I swerved into the lot and threw my car into park. The truck stopped behind me. A large man jumped out, running toward my car. I fumbled for my phone, ready to call for help, when I heard him yell, "Get out! There's someone in your back seat." I froze. My blood turned to ice. Slowly, I turned my head, barely breathing. And there just behind me, in the dim reflection of the glass, I saw a shape. A dark figure, crouched low. I threw the door open and stumbled onto the pavement, heart pounding. The truck driver pulled open my back door, and a man bolted out, sprinting into the night. I never saw his face, never knew how long he had been there, or what he had planned to do. But one thing still haunts me. If that truck driver hadn't been there, I might not be here to tell this story. Story 2. The Vanishing Hitchhiker. It was supposed to be just another long drive home. The kind where you turn on the radio, sip a cup of coffee, and count the miles until you finally pull into your driveway. But that night, I picked up a hitchhiker, and nothing was ever the same again. The road stretched ahead, empty and quiet. A light drizzle had begun to fall, misting my windshield. That's when I saw her standing by the side of the road, wearing a pale blue dress, her long hair hanging limp from the rain. She lifted one hand, signaling for a ride. I hesitated. I never pick up strangers, but something about her seemed off. She looked so lost, so helpless. Against my better judgment, I pulled over. She climbed into the passenger seat without a word. Her skin was cold, and her eyes had a faraway look. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to shake the unease creeping up my spine. She murmured an address one I recognized as being only a few miles away. I nodded and started driving. Silence filled the car. Then, in my peripheral vision, I saw her hands. They were trembling. I turned slightly, about to ask if she was okay, and she was gone. The seat was empty. My car door was still locked. The seatbelt lay untouched. My hands tightened on the wheel as panic set in. Had she ever been there at all? Shaken, I drove straight to the address she had given me. It was an old house, its porch light barely flickering. An elderly woman answered the door. Before I could speak, she sighed. "You saw her, didn't you?" I nodded, my throat dry. "She was my daughter," the woman whispered. "She died on that road 20 years ago. Every now and then she comes back trying to find her way home." I left without another word. But even now, I never drive that road alone at night, because sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I see her standing there again, waiting. Story 3. The Watcher at the Window. It started with a knock on the window. 3 soft taps, barely audible over the wind outside. At first, I thought I had imagined it. I lived alone on the 3rd floor, and there was no balcony. No tree close enough for someone to climb. Just an expanse of open air and the distant city lights. But the knocks came again, rhythmic, insistent. I swallowed hard and turned my head, pulse hammering in my ears. The curtains were drawn, but a faint shadow loomed behind them. I told myself it was a trick of the light, the wind, my mind playing tricks on me. But as I reached for my phone, the shadow shifted. Someone was there, watching. My heart slammed against my ribs. I grabbed the nearest object to lamp hand, yanked the curtains open. Nothing. Just darkness. The glass was closed. No sign of anyone. Shaken, I backed away, but then my phone screen lit up. A message from an unknown number. "Why did you look away?" I dropped the phone. My breath came in gasps. I spun, scanning the room. The door was locked. The windows sealed. No one could have gotten in. Another knock. This time, from inside the apartment. I never found out who or what was watching me that night, but I moved out the next morning. And I never, ever sleep with the curtains open again. Story 4. The Vanishing Passenger. I still feel uneasy every time I think about that night. It happened when I was working as a driver in Chicago, picking up late-night passengers to make extra cash. The city was quiet, the streets nearly empty, and I was just about to end my shift when I got one last request. The pickup location was near an old bridge, one I had driven past many times but never really thought much about. When I arrived, I saw a woman standing alone on the sidewalk. She was wearing a simple dress, her hair loose over her shoulders. There was something off about her posture. She stood too still, like a statue. She got into the back seat without a word, just nodding slightly when I asked if she was okay. Her destination was an address several miles away, but as I started driving, an unsettling silence filled the car. My rearview mirror gave me a perfect view of her, but I found myself avoiding looking at it. The whole ride felt strange. The air inside the car seemed colder than it should have been. At a red light, I stole a glance at her reflection. That's when I noticed it. Her face. It wasn't right. It was blurry, as if she were out of focus, like an old photograph losing its details. My stomach twisted. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. Then, without warning, she spoke. Her voice was soft, distant. "You know this road, don't you?" A chill ran down my spine. I did know this road. It led past the same bridge where I had picked her up. A bridge with a history. Years ago, a woman had lost her life there. I forced a nervous laugh. "Yeah, I guess so." She didn't respond. I focused on driving, counting the minutes until I could drop her off. But as I knew the address she had given me, I felt my heart sink. It was a cemetery. The moment I stopped the car, my hands were ice cold. I turned around to tell her we must have the wrong place. But the back seat was empty. The door hadn't opened. There was no sound, no movement. She was just gone. I stared at the vacant seat, my body frozen with fear. Then, as if to confirm what had happened, I looked at my phone screen. The ride request had vanished. No record of the trip, no proof that she had ever been there. I left that night with a lingering sense of dread, knowing I had given a ride to someone who wasn't supposed to be there. And sometimes, when I drive past that bridge, I swear I still see her standing there waiting. Story 5. The Locked Room Mystery. I still can't explain what happened that night. It's been years, but even now, when I close my eyes, I see the door handle turning on its own. It happened in 2016, when I was traveling through London for work. The company had booked me into an old but elegant hotel near the city center, one of those places with creaky wooden floors and antique decor. I checked in late at night, exhausted from the flight, and went straight to my room. The first thing I noticed was the strange layout. The bed faced a massive wardrobe, and there was an old-fashioned writing desk by the window. The only door in or out was the one I had just locked behind me. I went to bed quickly, but sleep didn't come easy. There was a weight in the air, something I couldn't quite explain. I must have drifted off at some point, because the next thing I remember was waking up to a soft sound. Click. It was subtle, but distinct, the sound of a door handle turning. I sat up instantly, my pulse hammering. The room was dark, but the outline of the door was visible against the dim light from the hallway. Click. This time, I saw it. The handle was moving, slowly, deliberately. Someone was trying to get in. I jumped out of bed and grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking as I turned on the flashlight and shone it toward the door. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice hoarse. No answer. I crept forward, heart pounding, and pressed my ear to the door. Silence. But I swear I could feel something on the other side. Someone. Summoning every ounce of courage, I unlocked the door and yanked it open. The hallway was empty. Not a soul in sight. No footsteps. No echo of someone retreating. Just the long, dimly lit corridor stretching endlessly in both directions. Shaken, I closed the door and locked it again. I checked the wardrobe and under the bed, just to be sure. Nothing. I told myself it had to be my imagination. But just as I was about to crawl back into bed, my phone buzzed. A message. "Why did you open the door?" I froze. My skin went cold. The message was from an unknown number. I never stayed in that room again. In the morning, I checked out without a word. When I asked the receptionist if anything strange had ever happened there, she just gave me a tight-lipped smile and said, "Some guests hear things." That's all she said. To this day, I don't know who or what was on the other side of that door, and I don't want to find out.